That's the sort of action we'll be seeing today in the Toshiba Australian Rally Sprint Trophy event, where 18 of state-level rally drivers will be tackling a 2-kilometre section of road. This is, believe it or not, only 8 kilometres west of the centre of the city of Canberra. It's a dry area and a very hot day. The drivers are not so experienced, but that can mean too that they will be more exciting and less predictable to watch. So action could be very good. One of them is an ex-Holden dealer team driver, and several of them are using the very latest in rally cars. We have a four-wheel drive turbo Subaru car just landed from Japan, of which about 10 of Australia's top rally drivers are rushing to buy at fairly bargain prices, and a brand new BMW 323 being prepared to Group A specification. It should be very interesting. They're tackling a 2-kilometre section of road in both directions, timed once in each direction. It's a very fast section, tight in parts, with about 20 bends and about 3 series of S-bends. So it should be very challenging for drivers with less experience, but nevertheless very good drivers who concentrate not on racing, but on rallying.
Okay, when you're ready.
That big throaty burble indicates that the Triumph TR7 of Neil Weston's has in fact got a Leyland P76 V8 engine in it. Out now, the first car on the trophy event running east.
The course 2 kilometres long, 21 corners.
Very powdery dust and therefore slippery on the surface at the moment, and with lots of power in this car and a short wheelbase that makes it fairly twitchy.
Weston third in the New South Wales Championships in 1984. Despite winning the last 3 rounds, more than anyone else in the championship, having his first ever run in this Peter Nelson-owned TR7 V8.
And through one of the tightest section of the track there, and had to throw it sideways and get half off the track to be able to line it up through the 4 metres wide only little culvert there. Because there's no escape road. To try and miss that culvert, you go really down a ditch. So you've got to get through it, and he almost came to a halt as he went through there. Past the halfway point.
59.12 seconds to the halfway point. Oh, and you heard the suspension bottom out then as he again dropped it in a culvert.
Road's narrow through this Armco section, or part of it is, and follows out with a very long sweeping bend where you can really steer the car on the throttle, 150 metres of it.
But then into this tight last corner before he charges to the finish line, through in 1 minute 42.55 seconds.
That's an average speed of 70 kilometres an hour.
Victorian Brian Smith and the naturally aspirated Sigma is second away in the rally sprint.
And although it was originally hoped to be a turbo, it's not. It's just a normally aspirated Sigma, which many of the experienced drivers say will be just as useful on this very slippery track.
In fact, they'd been hoping to supercharge, not turbocharge the motor car. And it's a development program which is coming up for the vehicle later this year. Smith built this car with the current Australian Rally champion, David Officer.
And look at how much wheel work he was putting in and how slow the car was to respond. It was still sliding in its previous direction when he'd thrown on about half a lock. Past the halfway point now.
At 57.35 seconds, so he's 1.4 seconds faster than Neil Weston at the same point. But much more untidy there.
But foot hard into it. He's not feathering, he's giving it plenty of throttle. Into the tight Armco section now. Coming up to the big sweeper.
And this sweeper a really tantalising one, because you can see the finish line up the road a little bit. You want to put your boot right into it, but then all of a sudden this tight corner comes up and slows you up as he goes across the line in 140.28, which is 2.3 seconds faster than Neil Weston.
7 years with the Holden dealer team as a rally driver. Wayne Bell now into this Toyota Sprinter Levin, single cam at about 125 horsepower. But a very, very good driver, Wayne Bell, regarded by many as one of the real talents in Australian rallying when he was running in open championship events a few years ago.
This car built by Mike Kransky of the Japanese connection in Sydney. In fact, was his wife's shopping car, then imported the twin-cam engine from Japan, has thrown it into the vehicle. This is its first run. Gearbox has been bought from Toyota Great Britain, putting out 123 brake horsepower, Group A car.
A lot more power to come. It could be 160 in squeezing now between that wooden fence near to us and the hay bales that surround a concrete abutment. A very tight, difficult section there, and one that'll wreck a car if there's any error.
A lot less turn-in from the front wheel as he went underneath our camera position there, and therefore a faster entrance and exit as he goes through in 56.98 seconds, the fastest time at the halfway point on round one.
Flicks it beautifully there, and he was in tight with the nose, had the tail working well. Again there. Good through these series of S-bends. Be interesting to see his timing. The timing didn't start officially, so Wayne may well get another run, but on this one it looks to be a fairly well stitched together run, fastest so far to the halfway point.
Keeping the vehicle nice and straight. Look at that, not chucking it about. If he gets another run, of course, he'll have a big advantage because he will have been able to practice the course today as he goes through unofficially in 1 minute 40.08 seconds, 0.2 of a second faster than Brian Smith. Driving the ex-Ross Dunkerton, ex-Jeff Portman, Datsun Stanza, Barry Lowe, the South Australian, twice South Australian champion, is at the starting line, and he's away.
Barry Lowe, one of 10 people who've got his name down to buy one of the new Subaru Turbo four-wheel drive rally cars.
Lowe, something of an innovator in the sport. He started the now famous Mazda concept, that is the Datsun 6, and he's gone. He has gone. He spun it out on the third corner.
The only thing Barry Lowe did right in this circumstance was to keep the car on the road. He had the lose with a gully beckoning to him, but the way to go with the lose was towards the bank and to safety. And the South Australian, too much power, too early, going a touch too fast, and should be straight there, and the car just keeps coming round.
Through the halfway point in 59.57 seconds. So of those that haven't spun, he is the slowest.
In the second outright in last year's, in the 1983, I should say, Victorian Rally Championship, that was when he was driving his Stanza.
And significantly slower through that section of track.
Again, the other disadvantage of front-wheel drive on loose surfaces is that as they accelerate, tend to take the weight off the front, off the drive wheels, and tend to induce wheel spin fairly easily, particularly if it's a car with a fair deal of power, as you obviously need in competition.
And this, believe me, is a very loose surface. Stops the clock in 1:44.08 to be the slowest by almost 2 seconds of those who've completed the course without incident. Blasting away from the line is the current Australian Capital Territory champion, Nick Belfield, in a new car, the ex-Arthur Jackson Nissan Stanza, which he bought only in December. Belfield second in the 1984 New South Wales Championship, controlling a 1600cc vehicle, and he's into it.
He was second in the rally sprint in the trophy section last year. Has only done 50 hard kilometres in this car, so he said there's plenty more to come from me. But you can see the right sort of man with the right sort of attitudes at the wheel of a pretty competitive car.
Belfield.
200 horsepower.
Belfield, a Capital Territory public servant in the Department of Housing and Construction. but a man with a big motorsport background. In fact, in 1976, he was the Papua New Guinea motocross champion on a 125 Suzuki. And a man who still loves bikes. In fact, he's lent his bike to the clerk of the course today for course clearing. As he comes up to the halfway point in 58.75 seconds, which makes him third fastest. The 50 competitive kilometres he's done in the car to date were in the first round of the New South Wales State Championships, which was stopped after only 50 kilometres because of fire danger in heavy bushfire periods. But he came fourth at the time the rally was stopped.
Now juggling it on the throttle through this right-hander. Nip left, right, drive it hard to the finish.
And a time of 1:40.49 puts him third fastest in the rally sprint. This course, called the Pipeline Road, running beside the Mongolo River in the foothills of the Green Hills Pine Forest outside Canberra. Halfway point at 58.65 seconds, which is second fastest. Not counting Wayne Bell's time, of course, which has not been taken in the first round. And he'll get a second run at the course. So the V8 power being very effective in these slippery conditions, giving Middleton the opportunity to go slightly slower into the corner, but then boot it earlier and use the torque to good effect to get out fast.
And this says an enormous amount about the basic handling and setup of a Holden Commodore, because it's very much a pretty standard sort of car, and has turned in a 42.65, which makes it fourth fastest, but by only 1/10 of a second slower than third fastest Neil Weston.
35-year-old used car salesman from Sydney, Doug Briscoe, started rallying only 2 years ago, and last year was named Rookie of the Year in the New South Wales Rally Championship, came third in the Clubman Championships, sixth in the New South Wales Championships. This is a car that he's developed himself, a Mazda RX-3, but it runs the Mazda RX-7 engine that was used by Phil Alexander at Bathurst last year in the James Hardy 1000. It's a Group G car, soon to be superseded by the Group A vehicles, which are coming up through the field now, but is competitive this year and eligible for the New South Wales Championships.
Untidy back there and lost some ground. Yes, no longer eligible for the National Championships. 280 horsepower thumping and crackling its way out of this car. Twin chamber, of course, Wankel rotary.
Briscoe, a big man, must come in at 18 stone. Wouldn't leave much room in the vehicle for his navigator as he goes through in 58.51 seconds, which is very competitive. Fastest at this point was Brian Smith at 57.35.
Doesn't get it turned in early enough there, and therefore slow onto the power and too wide and untidy there.
You note that Briscoe was actually hanging his back wheel over the edge of the precipice at that stage. He had no option but to keep his boot right into it, because backing off would have dropped him down the gully. Up to the finish line, backs off a bit early in fact for a 1:42.88. Car has a lot of history. It started life as a TR7, running in the Pro-Am series at Amaroo Park, driven by people like Bob Morris and Dick Johnson. And he goes through in a 58.55 seconds at our halfway point, and that's 0.6 of a second faster than Neil Weston, who's already driven the car today. Coming up to the line now through the big sweeper. This car takes a lot of courage to drive at these speeds. And Nelson crosses the line in a 42.06.
Another of one of many Nissan products. This is Stanza. Peter Thompson, the driver, car number 11. And therefore pumping out around the 200 horsepower, 5-speed transmission, the usual rally things of front-rear brake balance, limited slip differential, and pretty good tugging power in this car. It pulls well from low revs. Not so highly tuned as some of the cars like Jeff Portman's. Straightens it up as he comes across the culvert and therefore slips through the narrowest section of the circuit quite well.
Nice transition there from left to right, and not too much understeer as he went into the corner. Through our halfway point of 56.76, it's the fastest to date. Thompson is flying. It's even faster than the unofficial on Wayne Bell at a 56.98.
And then he gets loose there and goes very wide. But he's been tight and tidy, and that's been the essence of his run so far.
And this could give us a new leader in the rally sprint. Comes up through the Armco section, flings it into big turn 19 now. 2 corners to go after this.
Sideways, nice and early, power hard on, tight at the apex, tight again. Neat there, and it will be a good time.
And he's done it. 38.82, takes almost more than 1.5 seconds off the fastest time to date. WARBOYS, a 45-year-old Ford dealer from Blaney, somewhat let the cat out of the bag for the Ford Motor dealer, for the Ford Motor Company today, when he told us that by May Ford will have homologated 300 turbocharged lasers, complete with gas shock absorbers, Recaro seats and flares, so that people like him can drive them in rallies and in Group A motor racing as well. So big news for Ford coming up this year.
There's a lot happening in Group A. The turbo Subarus, which come in at about 125 horsepower, are thought to be able to stretch up to something close to 200. And while they're intended as a rally car, Jim Richards says it would be a very handy race car, as WARBOYS is coming to the 3rd last corner. He's there now, through the kink, 2nd last, particularly under difficult conditions, such as in the wet at Amaru.
Doing not a bad job, a 1:41.19 seconds. Jeff's been rallying now for 3 years, and he and his brother Doug share the support facilities by dint of running 2 cars. But interestingly enough, Doug's in a rotary-powered Mazda, Jeff's in a naturally aspirated, conventional 4-cylinder Ford, so they're not sharing too many spare parts.
And it's not just a conventional Ford, so to speak, but these Escorts really were the state-of-the-art in rally car handling, and the car for the not only privateers but for many years the factories overseas, with a BDA 230 horsepower motor. Won lots of international and national championship events all around the world. Superb handling car, very easy to drive, very forgiving, very easy to balance on the throttle, and with a whole range of engines, of which BRISCOE is using one of the lesser powered ones, a 2 valves per cylinder single cam motor, around 200 horsepower.
I tell you what, he's not doing too badly. He was 3rd fastest at the halfway point. Getting stuck right into it there for a 1:40.88.
Brings him up to 4th fastest behind Nick Bellfield's 40.49.
Jones 4th in the New South Wales Rally Championship last year. He's been rallying 10 years. Competed in the 1977 London to Sydney Marathon, finished 18th in a 180B, and this, in fact, is the car that he drove in the Repco reliability trial of 1979, finishing 24th. So the car has certainly been around. 3rd in the first round of this year's state championships.
And quick at the halfway point.
Very quick, a 55.53 at the halfway point, the fastest of all. Challenging Peter Thompson. In fact, he's 1.2 seconds faster than Peter Thompson at the halfway point. So this is the record run.
wide there, but he gets onto the power nevertheless. And that sort of time up his sleeve for the second half means that he had really to muff it, not to be the first or second fastest, into the right-hander. This will be critical. It goes on for a long time. He was tidy. I don't know if he was as quick, and he wasn't as early onto the power there, and he was much wider than some of the others.
But a 1:40.06. Yes, he lost a lot on the second section of the course. A Group A rally car, and terribly quiet. That's the sound of rallying in the future, isn't it?
Sound of a man looking after his motor car too, and not revving it so hard because he is still running it in.
He goes through our commentary position at 58.11 seconds, so he's way down the back of the field. Keep in mind that the fastest person through here has been Rod Jones, 55.53.
Standard struts in the car at the moment, and that was it. Typified by the way the car bounced slightly in that bumpy section where the other cars were just powering through their hard and beautifully set up sideways. We wouldn't expect this with four-wheel drive to be so sideways. Special price for rally competitors, only 10 of them coming in the country, and they could sell hundreds of them at the price that they're selling them. Normal retail would be over $19,000.
And his time is a 1:41.37.
Here's a way to spend lots of money. Dale Loader's done it and budgeted up to $55,000. Has a brand new 323i BMW, for which, unequipped for any form of competition, is $30,000 on the road, and he's planning to spend a lot more besides to bring it up to anything up to 200 horsepower is available in Group A form for this car. Could be a rally-winning car.
It came in with a lot of extras already on it, like a close ratio gearbox, limited slip differential, competition suspension, and even a brake bias kit, which allows him to adjust the braking bias between front and rear from inside the motor car. All that was optioned and fitted on the production line at BMW in Germany.
And how would you be treating your lovely prestige German motor car if it were brand new and on this sort of section of road? You wouldn't exactly be wanting to bounce it off the Armco or hurl it at one of the precipices. There's a lot of areas too where cars can run off here and really disappear down into the gully. It's quite a treacherous section of track potentially. Dale Loader at the halfway point.
And at the halfway point he's the first man to go through over the minute, a 61.56 at the halfway point. And he does have a brake problem with the car. He says that while it goes, it just doesn't stop at this stage, and he's still working on that problem. The car arrived in Australia just before Christmas, and it went straight up to Gosford to Ian Hill's workshop, but it arrived back from Hill only 2 days ago, and Loader's not had any opportunity to drive it or test it.
Gosford Dyno Tuners rally prepared some tremendously successful motor cars, and Dale Loader used to run for them years ago, running Mitsubishi Lancers and putting in some great performances. He's run Southern Cross rallies and 2 GOs up at Gosford.
So he goes through on a time of 1 minute 45.22 seconds, which makes him the slowest of the cars to complete the course without incident, remembering, of course, that Barry Lowe spun his car and went through in a 1:51.95. Now here's a car that's been around, crashed by Greg Carr, then crashed by none other than Kevin Bartlett when he rolled it in the 2GO 2 years ago. Now driven by Bruce Garland, who works with Garland as who works with Bartlett rather, as a motor mechanic. But Garland is a man with a big heart, and we'll see him make this VDA Escort work terribly hard indeed.
Been driven by Dick Johnson as well. It's like grandfather's axe, this car. You can't really say who's driven it in what condition, but because few of the original bits remain.
One interesting part about it is that it only uses a close ratio 4-speed gearbox instead of the 5-speed that you'd expect it to be in it. So maybe Garland doesn't have a gear for every occasion, which will force him to fling the car around just a little bit more, as you saw him doing there, as he came up to the culvert, then under our camera position.
And just look how delightfully that Escort's working for him, handling beautifully. He's doing a good job in it too, but the cars really are very responsive, and that's a great halfway time.
55.52. He's the fastest at the halfway point by 1/100th of a second.
Oh, and he's good through there. He runs too wide. He understeers. He's lost it. He's lost it. It's cost him 6/10 of a second there at least. Cost him time, and he was slow onto the throttle, slow into the next one. Funny how the car there understeered. He needed really to snap the throttle and crack it into oversteer. But then, hanging the front wheel over an apex, he gets in tight. And he's doing it pretty well here. He's not prepared to run wide again.
5 bites to the corner, and he still goes through in a 37.76 and is the leader in the Toshiba Rallycross, taking no fewer than 1.1 seconds off Peter Thompson's best time. So despite the half lose in the second half of the course, he's done it. Let's see that half lose again. Just misses the concrete post on the left-hand side of the course. He drops right off the road, flings himself back onto it, and just look how strong that roll bar is that lets the car bounce back on like a Sherman tank. And having unsettled himself before, he's now so fast into that corner that he had no option but to pull on full lock understeer and just get himself back on the roadway again. It's slow at the halfway point. He goes through in a 58.08, which is 2.5 seconds slower than Bruce Garland's record at that point of the track. Kremen distinguished himself last year by spinning in the initial rally sprint, held on a different course in the foothills of Canberra. And I think from the look of him this year that he's determined not to embarrass himself before the national television audience again.
The little 1.6 litre absolutely screaming, and turning in ultimately a good time of a 40.68 will make him 6th fastest at this stage.
Horan, quite a handy competitor. He has won state rounds of his championship and goes through in a 58.04. So certainly not disgracing himself, certainly not as much as Barry Lowe, who by this stage had spun and gone through in a 69.85.
Found a new bump there.
But Horan's done things like winning rounds of his state championship, come as high as 6th in Australian Rally Championships, 4th in the Begonia Rally only a week or so ago. And a man who enjoys his motorsport quite a lot.
In really tight there with lots of power on. These cars a bit flat, bit of a flat spot at about 4,500 revs, so you have to rev them pretty hard. And running to the line and producing ultimately a good time of 40.72.
Well, in one respect, Wayne Bell is having a terrible day. Not only had he recorded 3rd fastest time, very creditably in the first run, but when he came up to the line to rerun it because they forgot to start the clocks on him, he got a flat tyre. So now, with a new tyre on the back, he's away for his 2nd oblique stroke first run in the Toshiba Rally Sprint.
What he does know now, though, is that he has to improve by 1.14 seconds to take fastest time. And look at the ex-Holden dealer team driver hooking into it.
Time he's chasing is a 1:37.76, standing to Bruce Garland. Bell's unofficial time on his first run up the course was a 1:40.08.
Second fastest time at the moment is a 38.82 to Peter Thompson, 1.06 seconds slower than the fastest of Garland's.
Bell goes through in a 55.56. He's 4/400ths of a second slower than Garland at the halfway point, so he's really into it. Neater through there than Garland. Remember, that's where Garland had his lose, or half lose. And this could be a big challenge to Bruce Garland in the Ford Escort.
formerly from Newcastle, living now at St Mary's outside Sydney. Wayne Bell been out of regular rallying for a couple of years, been doing some go-karting, very nice through there, but oh, beautiful through there too. This is a good one.
He's done it. A 1:36.06 carves 1.6 seconds off Bruce Garland's fastest time, and Wayne Bell at the halfway point takes over the lead in the Toshiba Rally Sprint for 1984.
And averages 75 kilometres an hour. At the halfway point in the Toshiba Australian Rally Sprint Trophy, Wayne Bell, doing the final run and the second for him, has grabbed the lead at a 36.06, averaging 75 kilometres an hour, leading from Bruce Garland, Peter Thompson, Rod Jones, Brian Smith in a Sigma. But now let's have a talk, John Smales, with the leader at the moment, Wayne Bell.
At the halfway point of the Toshiba Rally Sprint Trophy, Wayne, they say that practice makes perfect, and you had a bit of practice.
It would appear that way, wouldn't it? Yes, I was a little bit lucky with the malfunction of the clock on the first run. It doesn't make me remember the course any better, but you do realise that the surface is not quite as slippery as it looks on the second run, so you can brake a bit later and probably go in a little bit deeper into the corners.
Still, you pulled almost 4 seconds off your first time. That's superb.
Yes, well, the first run I mucked up the causeway a little bit. I got a little bit offline, and with the small cars, you've got to keep them on line all the time, and this time it went through perfect, so what's the difference?
Well, this afternoon, of course, you're facing the opposite direction. Is it any easier on the way down?
I'm not sure. I've never been down it, actually. Actually, today was the first time I've been on the road in a rally car, and sorry, I have driven down it in a road car, and there's one corner that is a little bit difficult because it tightens up coming downhill, but it shouldn't be a problem really.
Well, you've got a second and a half up your sleeve on your next competitor. Can you afford to take it easy on the way down?
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Ready for the run down the hill in the second section of the trophy event of the Toshiba National Rally Sprint. And it's Neil Weston in the TR7 V8 away. He was 13th fastest on the way up. They're supposed to run in reverse order. That is, that the slowest man up gets to drive down the hill first. But in fact, because Weston's sharing his drive with Peter Nelson, also in the same car, and they were 12th and 13th respectively, Weston has to start some distance away, and that's the reason he's starting first down the hill.
Good through there. Having said down the hill, it's actually a fairly flat course. A couple of crests, particularly in this direction, a brow that hides the entry to a right-hand corner, and a very tight one at that. He's well and safely past it now.
At our halfway point, Neil Weston had performed a time of 43.93 seconds. You should expect him to be just slightly slower. He's run in the easterly direction this morning. Comes up to the last corner, sideways to the finish, and Neil Weston takes the TR7 V8 through in a time of 1 minute 37.56, which in fact is some 5 seconds quicker than his first run today.
Barry Lowe from South Australia was slowest in the reverse direction by 6.72 seconds, mainly because of a spin. Bad luck for him because the car showed its potential in another run. But Barry Lowe trying to rectify all that shows really what he can do.
He's 1.1 seconds slower at the halfway point than is Neil Weston in the TR7.
Weston's overall time was 37.56. Which is a very good time, actually.
Into the second last corner.
It's going to be a good time. It's 37.56 was WESTON. And this was 37.54, beating by 0.02 of a second. So a good return run, and certainly by comparison with his 51.95 in the other direction on the same 2-kilometre piece of road.
Poor old Dale Loader went for a bit of a country drive on his way up the course this morning, and he's doing exactly the same thing on the way back. This new BMW is perhaps one of the most expensive privately owned rally cars ever to come to Australia, and Loader in his first run on the thing is obviously not going to put it in any jeopardy at all as he goes through our halfway point in a 47 neat. That's some 4 seconds slower than Neil Weston's time in the TR7. The brakes are in desperate need of some work.
But people, sorry John, people say it has the potential to be a very competitive Group A rally car, because Group A looks at about 180, 200 horsepower, a twin cam Sprinter Toyota, or a perhaps a turbo Subaru at the top of its form, and this can give about 200 horsepower. So hang on to it, Loader. And he got it out too wide, but caught the correction quite well there. So if it can produce its 200, ultimately, when he spent all the money that he's budgeted on it, it mightn't be a bad car.
There's his time, a 1:43.53, which is no fewer than 6 seconds slower than anyone else so far down in the trophy event.
David Adams has come up from Victoria with his new Nissan Pulsar Turbo. Quite a hot little car, but in fairly standard form. But its main disadvantage as a rally car against the hotshot Group G cars, of which quite a lot are running here today in the trophy event, is that it's front-wheel drive, and it's very much harder to get the tail out, get it pointing well into corners. Tends to understeer and run wide, which is why, well, one of the reasons why Adams was 16th fastest in the series of runs to the east, now running west, trying to better a time of 37.54 for Barry Lowe in the Nissan Stanza. Best run in this direction so far. Mini Coopers were probably the most successful front-wheel drive rally car, and then they ended up developing so much power that it became difficult for them. Saab, of course, earlier than that, had a deal of success. 38.29 makes him slowest, except for Dale Loader's BMW in the run to the west.
Doug Briscoe in the RX-7 powered Mazda RX-3 is a man with a big heart and a big right foot, and he's showing it right now as he gives this car everything. He was 15th fastest in the trophy series in one direction, goes through our timing point at a 46.93, which makes him second fastest, third fastest, I'm sorry.
Really muscling the car and really enjoying it too. He's got 280 horsepower there from the ex-Phil Alexander James Hardy 1000 1984 engine, which is a carburettor 13B though, so it's the bigger capacity, more powerful Mazda type engine over which Alan Moffat and others had such wrangles, but running on carburettors. Solve all your problems with power, lad, that's the way.
He might not win this event, but by George he's going to enjoy it, isn't he?
He sure is. About 10,000 revs across the line to give him 39.53, and he certainly isn't going to win it. Brilliant to be out in the middle of the middle of nowhere virtually, and have crickets chirping and other animals just sort of making their quiet clicking noises in the middle of the night, have a rally car suddenly start to thump and wail its way into view, and the skies start to light up with these quartz halogen lamps that just have such an enormous spread and throw. Middleton across the line in 39.71, slower than BRISCOE, slower than all but Dale Loader.
Second half of the run now is where Nelson can start to build up some pace. Because in this open section, theoretically, he ought to know the way this very short wheelbase vehicle will move about much better than Weston. Weston's total time this run too was 1 minute 37.56. That's the time that Nelson now is shooting for with 1 corner left to go, and it's going to be terribly close.
Outside.
And on the aggregate of the 2 runs, Neil Weston in fact beats Peter Nelson by just 2/100ths of a second. Weston's time a 3 minute 20.11 to Nelson 3 minutes 20.13.
Pretty useful car, fuel injected, 125, 130 horsepower as it sits there, ex-factory, and a bonus price to recognised rally drivers. Considerable discount on the normal, like about a 40% discount over normal retail if you could buy one, but they're not normally for sale here. To be fastest in this run towards the west, the return run, he's aiming at a time of 3:29.71. Sorry, 3:38.07. 3:38.07. And with a 38.81 outside it, Peter Clark in the Subaru.
.45.81 at our halfway point, which isn't that smart. Peter Nelson, for example, did a 45.21 in the TR7 V8, and Neil Weston did a 43.93. Comes up to the finish line now. Probably won't crack a 40 and didn't. A 1 minute 40.16, which in fact makes him second slowest on the way down behind Dale, in front of Dale Loader on the 41.43.53.
This RS2000 differs from a lot of the other RS2000s going around at the moment. It doesn't feature the Ford close ratio.
And this car, of course, to be superseded in New South Wales Rally Championships at the end of this year, when the Group A situation takes over. And an excellent run from Jeff Briscoe on the way back down, a 38.17, and Briscoe's aggregate time of 3 minutes 19.05 seconds gives him the lead in the Toshiba Rally Sprint Trophy Series.
This is Phil Horan, who had its best time in the Stanza on the way east of 140.72. Chasing a 38.07 to be fastest on this section, but an aggregate of 19.05, 3 minutes 19.05, to beat Jeff Briscoe, the current leader overall. Cloud cover making the day cooler now from when it was very hot. You can see it's still as dry as toast and very dusty. Not dampening Phil Horan's enthusiasm at all. In the Stanza, Round the final corner now to the finishing line. 40.07, so he fails in both missions, both to take the lead overall and also to have the fastest time to this point, although he was, as we said, 8th fastest in the runs in the reverse direction.
But nonetheless, we're amongst the flyers now, and Kremen proves that as he goes through in a 44.84 at our halfway point, which is amongst the fastest, in fact, third fastest.
Levin himself, quite a successful motorsport campaigner over the years.
7,000 RPM at least from the little twin cam Toyota.
Trial, I should say, in 1979. Both its products.
With just the final corner remaining, he looks in good condition as only 35 goes through the clock now. And yes, that's it for Ron Kremen, a 1:36.75, the fastest run of the second session, beating Neil Weston by 0.8 of a second.
What he says is
Time to beat at our halfway point is a 43.93, and he goes through in a 43.60, so he's beaten Neil Weston's halfway time by 0.3 of a second.
in fact recorded a third outright in the Papua New Guinean Safari at one stage.
And he's doing it nice and neatly, using a lot of body English inside the cabin, trying to keep the vehicle as straight as he possibly can.
Sideways very early there, so he was finally able to gun it out of the corner fairly early on, because his corner was all over almost before he got to the apex.
And this is looking good, although he's blown it there. A 1:36.33. Yes, he's done it. Ron Kremen, a 1:36.75, so a new leader in the second run at 1:36.33 to Nick Belfield. And it's Brian Smith in the Mitsubishi Sigma, who's the 5th last competitor come down on the second section of the track. And the time's really starting to tumble now in the trophy event. The lead stands with Nick Belfield on 3:16.82 seconds. The aggregate of his two runs, and he's gone! And over the edge.
Yes.
And that's a bit dodgy there, because that's a long way down to the river, but he's okay. Back on the track and gone again.
This is how it happened for Smith. And look at the car suddenly take over and suddenly clamp on everything. He's got all brakes on there hard on the basis of try and hit whatever it is as slowly as possible. The Weeping Willow hasn't even turned an eye to him, but that's just where he could have gone. Able to rescue the situation a little bit earlier. Has the slowest time overall of 3:32.95. Actually, despite all that drama and excitement, only 3.5 seconds slower than Barry Lowe's overall time of 3:29.49, the previous slowest. Rod Jones ready and away in the Datsun 200B that took him to 4th fastest on the way up, a 40.06. He was the head of 6 cars that were covered by only 0.82 of a second in their fastest runs in the opposite direction. And Rod Jones very busy now, looking for an almost impossible task of exactly 4 seconds on Wayne Bell, 2.3 seconds on Bruce Garland, to take over first or second place
But look, and he's going to have to do a 3-point turn almost, no handbraker. And it is a 3-point. Brakes hard on, turns in with the brakes on. Look at the back wheel, it long since stopped turning here. That's a 200B, the second model on from the faithful old 1600. He's gone again. And
back, I say, back.
Well, he does win the award for 2 losers in the one run. 2 kilometres, twice out of control. Clock ticking away. And he's only just going to be the slowest run by a couple of seconds. 56.2 actually takes him out by about 3.5 over Smith. Third fastest on the way up was Peter Thompson in the Stanza. Another Nissan. Guns away. He had a 38.82, which was 1.7 slower than the best by Wayne Bell. But a big chance. Look, he's got this car flowing. Have a look at this one for excitement and speed.
There's just one corner he has to get through, which has created some difficulty for the last 2 drivers. And he's through it.
Usually very ironic cheers from spectators when somebody finally gets through such a point, and good round the post. In other words, he nearly hit it. He used a lot of road there, and that indicates he was pretty quick through there.
44.77 at our halfway point. Not a particularly quick time. They've been as low as 43.93.
Again, got it sideways under power at pretty high speed. Flings it then in a slower corner, guns it out and up a cog. Fastest, 36.33 in the runs in this westerly direction. Well past the other bogey corner now. That was Nick Belfield, a 36.33.
One corner remains. Not bad. 1:36.81, which makes him 3rd fastest on run 2. And Peter Thompson takes over the lead with an aggregate time of 3 minutes 14.63, leading Nick Belfield 3 minutes 16.82, and Ron Kremen 3 minutes 17.43. Now on the starting line, waiting to go, is Garland, Bruce Garland, in the Ford Escort. Just to leave in his own time, and he's away. Garland brained him on the way up with a 1:37.76. Was only beaten by the terribly experienced Wayne Bell with a 1:36.06. And remember that Bell did that time at a second practice run. His first time up was only a 1 minute 40.08. So Garland in with a big chance.
Let's see if they can get around the bend and cause everyone else so much trouble.
Garland, a big fit fellow, been rallying for 8 years. 44.77 at the halfway point, about 4th fastest.
At which time, like all the quick drivers, he just plonked it up a cog as he went past the 1 kilometre mark, which is where our van's situated, so he really is going well. You have to be going fast enough to need the cog, and then you have to be brave enough to put it into it.
Oh dear, there's showmanship for you. And why not? 1 corner remaining. Very good, very neat. A 1:37.05, not the fastest. In fact,
about
3rd fastest.
4th.
4th.
Behind Thompson's 36.81.
And there's the leader of the Toshiba Rally Sprint. Trophy class, Wayne Bell, in the Toyota Sprinter, waiting at the start. The new leader is Bruce Garland, who's done a 3 minutes 14.81 on aggregate. He leads from Peter Thompson, 3 minutes 15.63. And Nick Belfield, 3 minutes 16.82. But it's all now down to Wayne Bell,
who, with a 36.06 in the other direction, needs only a 37.75, about 6th or 7th fastest run in this direction, to take the trophy event overall. So a sensible run from the member of the Holden dealer team, rally team for 7 years, Wayne Bell, should win him the event, as John Waterhouse won it last year from Nick Belfield and Neil Weston.
Well, it's not a sensible run. He's going flat out. He's just gone through our post in a 43.66, which gives us a new leader at, no, it doesn't. In fact, Nick Belfield, a 43.60. So he's 0.06 of a second slower than Belfield at the halfway point. Bell pacing himself nicely. Sometimes the fastest time is the way to pace yourself. Go too slow, you lose concentration.
One of the cars that cost Wayne Bell dearly, I think, was a turbocharged Gemini that the Holden dealer team, George Shepherd, tried to develop, as he's heading without any question for victory in this trophy section at a 34.4.
Which is the fastest of the second runs, eclipsing by more than almost 2 seconds Nick Belfield on 1:36.33.
Of the 18 competitors that undertook the Toshiba Australian Rally Sprint Trophy event, some of Australia's best state-level rally drivers, Wayne Bell was clearly the winner in the Toyota Sprinter Levin, some 4.35 seconds faster than second place Bruce Garland, and then quite close between Garland in second place, Peter Thompson third, Nick Belfield, and Ron Kremen. And now down with the winner, John Smales.
So at the end of the day, it's fastest up and fastest back for Wayne Bell. Not a bad run, Wayne, for a car that you hadn't driven until Friday.
Astonishing, actually. I'm very surprised. It's only a Group A car. It is very, very standard in the motor. And as you know, Group A rallying is happening in this country now. And I think this is a good indication of the type of car that will be competing in the future.
Well, some strong competition there from the Group G cars, Garland's, for example.
Very strong competition. Brucey Garland drove very well, so did Peter Thompson. They have a lot more power than I have, and I think it's a credit to the little car to do what it's done.
Well, the course demanded a smooth style. Maybe that's what did it.
Yes, it most certainly did. I watched Colin drive it, and he drove it like a racing driver. And I have also been doing some go-karting, which has helped me tidy my lines up a lot, you know. And I still get a little sideways coming in, but as long as the exit is dead smooth, it's all right.
Well, you realise, of course, that you win today in the trophy class puts you up into the competition class with the big drivers next year.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. That'll be excellent. I am looking forward to that. I was a little disappointed I didn't get the opportunity to compete with them this year, but next year for sure. But, I just all the boys from Japanese Connection for putting the car together. They've done a good job.